18th of August 1966, Phuoc Tuy Province, South Vietnam. 3:15 in the afternoon. 108 Australian soldiers walk into a rubber plantation. Within an hour, they will face over 2,000 enemy troops in a planned ambush. This is the story of how they survived. If you want to see more untold stories from the Vietnam War, subscribe to Vietnam War Records and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The air is thick, heavy. The kind of humidity that wraps around your lungs and makes every breath feel like swallowing water. D Company, 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, moves through the long tan rubber plantation in a loose patrol formation. The trees stand in perfect geometric rows, planted decades ago by French colonists. Each tree is about 30 feet from the next. The spacing creates corridors, long sight lines in some direction, total blindness in others. Major Harry Smith, the company commander, knows this terrain is dangerous. Rubber plantations are killing grounds. You can see far enough to know someone, but not far enough to know how many, or where they are coming from. The Australians are hunting. They are looking for the mortar teams that shelled their base at Nui Da 2 nights ago. On the night of the 16th, Viet Cong mortars rained down on the Australian Task Force headquarters. 1 soldier was killed. 23 were wounded. The mortar fire was precise, calculated. It was a message. The enemy was close, and they were watching. Now, D Company has been sent to find them, to track the mortar, to flush out the enemy and destroy them before they strike again. But what Major Smith does not know, what none of the Australians know, is that they are not hunting the enemy. The enemy is hunting them, and the enemy has been waiting for this exact moment. Somewhere in the jungle, concealed in the thick vegetation beyond the rubber trees, elements of the Viet Cong 275th Main Force Regiment and the D445 Provincial Mobile Battalion are already in position. Over 2,000 men, battle-hardened, disciplined, armed with machine guns, mortars, and recoilless rifles. Their orders are simple: annihilate the Australian company, overrun them quickly, then push forward to Nui Dat and launch a full-scale assault on the Australian base. It is a bold plan, a coordinated attack designed to prove that the Australians are vulnerable, that their small force, isolated in Phuoc Tuy Province, can be crushed. The Viet Cong commanders believe they have the advantage. They have numbers, they have surprise, they have terrain, and they have underestimated the Australians. At 3:40 in the afternoon, 11th Platoon, commanded by Lieutenant Jeff Kendall, makes first contact. They spot a small group of Viet Cong moving through the plantation. The enemy appears to be withdrawing, fleeing. Kendall's men give chase. They move quickly through the rubber trees, weapons raised, adrenaline pump. Find the enemy, fix them, destroy them. But as 11th Platoon pursues, they are being drawn deeper into the plantation. The Viet Cong they are chasing are not fleeing, they are bait, and 11th Platoon is walking straight into the jaws of an ambush. At 3:52, the jungle erupts. The sound is overwhelming. Automatic weapons fire from 3 directions: machine guns, AK-47s, RPGs. The noise is a physical thing. It slams into the Australians like a wall. 11th Platoon drops. They return fire. But the enemy fire is relentless. Bullets tear through the rubber trees, bark explodes, leaves shred, men scream. Within seconds, 11th Platoon is pinned down. They are outnumbered, surrounded on 3 sides, and they are taking casualties. Sergeant Bob Buick, a veteran soldier, rallies his men. He moves through the platoon, shouting orders, directing fire. A round punches through his arm. He keeps moving. Another round hits his leg. He keeps fighting. The Australians are trained for this. They do not panic. They form a defensive line. They find cover behind the rubber trees, in the shallow folds of the ground. They fire controlled bursts, aimed shots. Every bullet must count, because they do not know how long this fight will last, and they do not know if help is coming. Major Harry Smith hears the gunfire. He is half a kilometer away with the rest of D Company. The sound rolls through the plantation like thunder. He knows immediately that 11th Platoon is in trouble. He radios Lieutenant Kendall. The report is grim. Heavy contact. Large enemy force. Casualties mounting. Smith makes a decision. He will not leave 11th Platoon to die. He deploys 10 Platoon and 12 Platoon to support Kendall's men. They move quickly through the rubber trees, spreading out into assault formation. But as they advance, they too come under fire. The enemy is everywhere. The Viet Cong have committed their entire force. This is not a skirmish. This is a full-scale, and the Australians are outnumbered more than 20 to 1. Smith realizes the situation has changed. His company is not hunting the enemy. They are fighting for survival. He orders his men to form a defensive perimeter, a tight circle, interlocking fields of fire, every man covering the man next to him. The wounded are pulled into the center of the perimeter. No one is left behind. This is the Australian way. You hold your ground, you protect your mates, and you fight until the last round is gone. The Viet Cong commanders are confident. They have the Australians surrounded. They have superior numbers. They launch their first assault wave. Dozens of men rise from the jungle and charge through the rubber trees. They fire as they run, screaming, aggressive, overwhelming. The Australians open fire. The L1A1 self-loading rifles crack in disciplined bursts. 7.62mm rounds punch through the charging enemy soldiers. Men drop, but more keep coming. The Viet Cong are brave, fearless. They believe they can overrun the Australians through sheer weight of numbers, but the Australians do not break. They hold their fire until the enemy is close, 30 meters, 20 meters. Then they unleash controlled volleys. The fire is devastating. The assault wave falters, stumbles, collapses. Bodies pile up in front of the Australian positions. The survivors regroup and prepare for the next assault. The Viet Cong commanders do not understand what they are facing. They expected the Australians to panic, to break, to run. But these men are not running. These men are fighting with a discipline and ferocity that the Viet Cong have rarely encountered. Major Smith knows that small arms fire alone will not save his company. He needs artillery. He radios back to Nui Dat. He speaks to the forward observers with his company. Morty Mummy, an Australian artillery officer, and 2 New Zealand gunners from 161 Battery. Smith gives them the coordinates. Danger close. Fire missions within 100 meters of friendly positions. The forward observers do not hesitate. They call in the fire. At Nui Dat, 5 kilometers away, the New Zealand gunners of 161 Battery load their 105mm howitzers. They elevate the barrels, adjust for range, and fire. The first shells scream overhead. They impact in the jungle beyond the Australian perimeter. The explosions are massive. Trees shatter, earth erupts, shrapnel scythes through the enemy ranks. The Viet Cong soldiers who were preparing for another assault are torn apart. The survivors scatter. The Australian forward observers adjust fire. Closer, tighter. The shells land within meters of the Australian positions. The noise is deafening. But the artillery is breaking up the enemy formation. Every time the Viet Cong mass for an assault, the artillery smashes into them. The New Zealand gunners fire without stopping, round after round. The barrels of the howitzers begin to glow. Paint burns off. The ammunition stockpiles at Nui Dat are emptying, but the guns keep firing. Over 3,000 rounds will be fired. It is one of the most intense artillery bombardments of the entire Viet, and it is the only thing keeping D Company alive. But the artillery Viet Cong keep coming. They attack from different directions, probing for weaknesses, testing the Australian line. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky opens. The monsoon rain falls in sheets. Visibility drops to 10 meters. The rubber plantation becomes a maze of water and mud. The Australians can barely see beyond the nearest tree. The enemy uses the rain as cover. They crawl closer. They launch sudden assaults through the downpour. Shapes emerge from the rain. Viet Cong soldiers appear at point-blank range. The fighting becomes hand to hand. Grenades are thrown. Bayonets are fixed. The Australians fire into the rain, into the shadows. They cannot see the enemy until they are almost on top of them. The mud sucks at their boots. The wounded lie in pools of... Some are in danger of drowning. The living drag them to higher ground. The rain is so loud that orders must be shouted. Hand signals are useless. The Australians rely on instinct, on training, on trust. Every man knows his role. Every man knows that if he breaks, the entire line collapses, and if the line collapses, they all die. The ammunition is run. Magazines are nearly empty. The Australians count their rounds. 10 left. 5. They fire only when they have a target, only when they can see the enemy. The discipline is extraordinary. Most soldiers, surrounded and outnumbered, would have emptied their weapons in the first hour. But the Australians were trained for this. They were trained in the jungles of Queensland, at the Canungra Jungle Warfare School. They were taught the lessons of the Malayan emergency, small unit tactics, fire discipline, patience. They were taught that in the jungle, the side that panics loses. The side that stays calm survives. And so they stay calm, even as the enemy closes in, even as the rain pours down. Even as the bodies pile up in the mud, they hold the line. Major Harry Smith knows that his company is on the edge. They cannot hold much longer. The ammunition will run out, the artillery will run out. And when that happens, the Viet Cong will overrun them. He radios back to battalion headquarters. He requests immediate reinforcement. A relief force. Anything. Lieutenant Colonel Colin Townsend, the battalion commander, he orders a company to mount up. A company, commanded by Major Noel Ford, loads onto M113 armored personnel carriers. 11 vehicles. Each one carries infantry and a 50. The APCs roar out of Nui Dat at 5:45 in the afternoon. They drive straight into the storm, straight toward the sound of the guns. The drivers cannot see. The rain hammers the windshields. The tracks churn through mud, but they do not stop. They drive through the jungle, through enemy positions. The 50 caliber machine guns open fire. The gunners sweep the tree lines. Viet Cong soldiers are caught in the heavy machine guns cut them down. The APCs crush through vegetation, smash through obstacles. Nothing stops them. They are a juggernaut, and they are heading straight for D Company. At 6 o'clock, the APCs break through the enemy lines and reach D Company's perimeter. The Australians hear the engines, see the shapes of the vehicles through the rain. For a moment they think it might be but then they see the Australian markings. Relief floods through the company. The APCs form a protective ring. The 50 caliber machine guns provide suppressing fire. Infantry dismount and reinforce the perimeter. The wounded are loaded on. Ammunition is resupplied. Magazines are refilled. Water is handed out. The Australians have been given a lifeline. But the battle is not over. The Viet Cong are still out there, still fighting, still determined to annihilate the Australians. But the arrival of the APCs has broken their momentum. The enemy commanders realize that they have lost the advantage. Their assault waves have been shattered by artillery. Their casualties, and now the Australians have been reinforced. The Viet Cong begin to withdraw. They pull back into the jungle, dragging their dead and wounded with them. The battlefield falls silent. The rain continues to fall. The Australians remain in their positions, weapons raised, ready for another assault. But no assault comes. The enemy is gone. As the rain eases and darkness falls, Major Smith orders his men to hold their positions. They will spend the night in the rubber plantation, surrounded by the dead, by the mud, by the smell of gunpowder and blood. No one sleeps. They take turns on watch, listening for movement, for the sound of the enemy returning. But the jungle is quiet. The next morning, at first light, the Australians sweep the battlefield. What they find is staggering. 245 confirmed enemy dead. Bodies are scattered across the plantation. Some are clustered in groups where artillery struck. Others lie alone, cut down. Blood trails lead into the jungle. The Australians follow the trail. They find more bodies, discarded weapons, abandoned equipment. The enemy has suffered a catastrophic defeat. Australian intelligence estimates that over 350 enemy soldiers were wounded. Many of those will die in the coming days. The Viet Cong 275th Regiment has been destroyed as a fighting force. The D445 Battalion has been gutted. The enemy's plan to attack Nui Dat has been shattered. The Australians, but the cost has been high. 18 Australian soldiers are dead. 24 are wounded. Most of the casualties are from 11 platoon. The men who made first contact. The men who held the line while the rest of the company deployed. Their sacrifice saved D Company. Their courage under fire prevented a massacre. The Battle of Long Tan sends shockwaves through both the Australian and enemy commands. The Australians are stunned by the scale of the engagement. A single company, outnumbered more than 20-1, has defeated a regimental-sized enemy force. It is a victory that defies belief. But it is also a victory that validates everything the Australian Army has been teaching. The tactics learned in Malaya, the doctrine developed at Canungra, the emphasis on small unit, on fire discipline, on artillery integration. It all worked. The enemy reaction is even more telling. Captured documents and prisoner interrogations reveal that the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army commanders are shocked. They did not expect the Australians to fight with such ferocity. They did not expect the artillery to be so devastating. They did not expect the Australians to hold their ground. The enemy's intelligence assessments are revised. Australian units are now Viet Cong commanders are ordered to avoid direct confrontation with Australian forces, to use guerrilla tactics, to strike and fade. The days of massing troops for large-scale assaults against the Australians are over. Long Tan has taught the enemy a lesson they will not forget. The Australians operate differently than the Americans. This is a fact that both allies and enemies recognize. The American military in Vietnam relies on overwhelming firepower, search and destroy missions, large unit operations, brigade-sized sweeps. They move through the jungle with helicopters, with artillery, with air support. They call in airstrikes at the first sign of contact. They saturate areas with bombs and napalm. It is a strategy built on industrial-scale warfare, on the belief that superior technology and firepower will inevitably win. And in many cases, it does. But it also creates problems. The heavy American presence alienates the local population. The massive base camps and fire support bases consume enormous resources. The reliance on helicopters makes American units predictable. The Viet Cong learned to hear the helicopters coming, to set ambushes near landing zones, to strike and fade before the American firepower can be brought to bear. The American strategy is effective in some ways, but it is also costly, and it struggles to achieve lasting results. The Australians take a different approach. They do not have the resources for massive operations. They cannot flood the battlefield with helicopters and artillery. They do not have the luxury of overwhelming firepower, so they adapt. They rely on the lessons learned in the Malayan emergency. In Malaya, the British and Australian forces defeated a communist insurgency through patience, through small unit tactics, through winning the support of the local population. The Australians bring those lessons to Vietnam. They conduct long-range patrols with small teams, 4 to 6 men, section-sized patrols for regular infantry. They move silently, slowly. They cover only a few hundred meters a day. They stop frequently to listen, to observe, to set ambushes. They do not announce their presence. They do not call in artillery unless absolutely necessary. They do not fire unless they have a clear target. The Australian patrols are ghosts. The Viet Cong fear them because they know when they will strike. The Australian SAS is the most feared unit in Phuoc Tuy Province. One squadron, Special Air Service Regiment, deploys to Vietnam in 1966. Their mission is long-range reconnaissance, deep penetration patrols into enemy-controlled territory. The SAS operates in 4 to 6-man teams. They insert by helicopter, often at false landing zones to deceive the Then they walk to their objective. It might take them days. They move through the jungle in complete silence. No talking, no smoking, no unnecessary movement. They communicate with hand signals. They navigate by map and compass. They avoid trails. They avoid villages. They avoid contact unless absolutely necessary. Their job is to gather, to find the enemy, to report their positions, and, when the opportunity presents itself, to kill. The SAS ambushes are legendary. They set up along known enemy trails. They wait for hours, sometimes days. When the enemy walks into the kill zone, the SAS opens fire. Short, then they disappear. The Viet Cong never know what hit them. They find they're dead, but they never find the Australians. The Viet Cong put bounties on SAS soldiers. Captured documents reveal that local VC commanders are ordered to avoid areas where the SAS is operating. The enemy calls them the Phantoms, the silent killers. They do not understand how the Australians can move through the jungle without making a sound, how they can set ambushes without being detected, how they can kill and vanish. The answer is training. The SAS selection course is brutal. Only a small percentage of candidates publish. Those who do are the best soldiers in the Australian Army. They are expert marksmen, expert navigators, expert survivors. They can live in the jungle for weeks with minimal support. They can track an enemy force through dense vegetation. They can move through the jungle at night without a flashlight. They are the elite. And in Vietnam, they prove it. The SAS completes hundreds of patrols during the war. Not a single SAS patrol is overrun. Not a single patrol is wiped out. Their kill ratio is the highest of any. They are, without question, the deadliest soldiers in the jungle. But the SAS is a small unit. There are only a few dozen SAS operators in Vietnam at any given time. The bulk of the Australian effort falls to the regular infantry battalions. Units like 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. These are not special forces. They are line infantry, conscripts and regulars. Young men, many of them barely 20 years old, but they are trained to the same high standard as the SAS. They go through the Canungra Jungle Warfare School. They learn to move sight to set ambushes, to survive in the jungle. They learn fire, discipline, marksmanship, small unit tactics. And when they arrive in Vietnam, D Company, 6th RA proves this at Long Tan. They are not special forces. They are not elite commandos. They are ordinary soldiers, but they are trained, disciplined, professional. And when the moment comes, they do not break. They hold the line. They fight with courage and skill, and they win. The artillery at Long Tan is provided by New Zealand 161 Battery, Royal New Zealand Artillery, 605mm howitzers. The New Zealand gunners are highly skilled. They train constantly with the Australian infantry. They practice danger close fire missions where the shells land within 200 meters of friendly troops. Most artillerymen would refuse such missions. The risk of friendly fire is too high. But the New Zealanders trust their skills, and the Australians trust them. At Long Tan, that trust is put to the ultimate test. The forward observers with D Company call in fire missions within 100 meters of the Australian positions. The margin for error is almost zero. A slight miscalculation, a gust of wind, a faulty shell. Any of these could kill the Australians, but the New Zealand gunners do not miss. Every shell lands exactly where it is supposed to. The barrage is so accurate that the Viet Cong soldiers are killed within meters of the Australian lines. The Australians can feel the concussion of the explosions. They can feel the shrapnel whistling overhead, but they are not hit. The artillery is perfect, and it saves their lives. The New Zealand gunners fire over 3,000 rounds in 3.5 hours. It is an extraordinary rate of fire. The gun crews work without stopping, firing, loading, firing. The barrels overheat. The paint burns off. The gunners' hands blister from the heat, but they do not stop. They know that Australian soldiers are dying, that every second counts, that every shell they fire might save a life, and so they keep firing until the ammunition is almost gone, until the enemy withdraws, until the battle is over. When the gunners finally stop, they collapse from exhaustion. Their ears are ringed, their hands are burned, but they have done their job. They have saved D Company, and they have earned the respect and gratitude of every Australian soldier at Long Tan. The enemy perspective on Long Tan is rarely discussed, but it is important. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers who fought at Long Tan were not amateurs. They were experienced fighters. Many of them had been fighting for years against the French, against the South Vietnamese army, against the Americans. They knew how to fight. They knew how to win, and they believed they would win at Long Tan. The plan was sound. Surround a small Australian company, overwhelm them with numbers, annihilate them quickly. Then push forward to the Australian base and launch a larger attack. The Viet Cong commanders expected the Australians to panic, to break, to run. They had seen other units do exactly that. But the Australians did not run. They stood their ground. They fought back with a discipline and intensity that the Viet Cong did not expect. The enemy soldiers who survived Long Tan spoke of the Australian fire discipline, of the way the Australians seemed to fire every shot with purpose, of the way they held their ground even when surrounded. And the endless, devastating artillery that tore through their ranks, that broke their assault waves, that made victory impossible. Vietnamese sources claim lower casualty figures for Long Tan. Official Vietnamese military histories list 47 killed and 100 wounded. These numbers are disputed by the physical evidence. The Australians counted 245 bodies on the battlefield. They followed blood trails for kilometers. They found abandoned, discarded equipment, medical supplies. The evidence suggests that the Vietnamese official figures are significantly understated. This is not unusual. Most militaries underreport their casualties. It is a matter of morale, of propaganda. But the true cost of Long Tan for the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army was far higher than 47 men. It was a catastrophic defeat. The 275th Regiment was effectively destroyed. The D445 Battalion was gutted. The planned attack on Noi Dat never happened, and the enemy learned to fear the Australians. The psychological impact of Long Tan cannot be overstated. For the Australians, it is a moment of pride, proof that their training works, that their tactics are sound, that they can stand toe-to-toe with a numerically superior enemy and win. It boosts morale across the entire Australian task force. Soldiers who were unsure about their ability to survive in Vietnam now know that they can, that they have the skills, the discipline, the courage. Long Tan becomes a symbol, a rallying point, a reminder of what Australians can achieve when they stand together. For the enemy, Long Tan is a trauma. The Viet Cong commanders who planned the operation are disgraced. Their units are shattered. Their soldiers are demoralized. The survivors speak of the Australians with fear, with respect. The enemy's intelligence assessments are rewritten. Australian units are now flagged as high-risk targets. Viet Cong and North Vietnamese commanders are ordered to avoid direct engagement, to use guerrilla tactics, to strike from a distance. The large-scale assaults that characterized the early years of the war become rarer in Phuoc Tue province. The enemy has learned that attacking the Australians head-on is suicide. The tactical lessons of Long Tan are studied by military forces around the world. The battle is taught at staff colleges, at infantry schools, at artillery courses. It is a textbook example of how a small, well-trained unit can defeat a larger enemy through discipline, firepower, and leadership. Major Harry Smith's decisions during the battle are analyzed in detail. His decision to deploy his platoons to support 11 platoon, his decision to form a tight defensive perimeter, his aggressive use of artillery, his refusal to abandon the wounded, his calm leadership under extreme. Every decision was correct. Every decision saved lives. Smith is later awarded the Military Cross for his actions at Long Tan. There are ongoing efforts to have his award upgraded to the Victoria Cross, Australia's highest military honour. Many believe he deserves it, that his leadership at Long Tan was extraordinary, that without him D Company would have been annihilated. The soldiers of D Company are also recognised. Several are awarded the Military Medal, others are mentioned in dispatch. But for many years, the full story of Long Tan is not widely known outside Australia. The battle is overshadowed by larger American operations, by the Tet Offensive, by the fall of Saigon. It is not until decades later that Long Tan receives the recognition it deserves. In 2008, 42 years after the battle, the Australian government awards a unit citation to D Company. It is a long overdue acknowledgement of their courage and sacrifice. The veterans of Long Tan are finally honoured, finally recognised, finally given the respect they earned on that terrible afternoon in the rubber plantation. The Long Tan Cross is erected at the battle site, a simple white cross. It bears the names of the 18 Australians who died. For years, the cross stands in the plantation as a memorial, a reminder, but in later years, the Vietnamese government removes the cross. It is of tension. The Australians want the memorial to remain, to honour their dead. The Vietnamese see it as a symbol of foreign intervention, of war. The cross is eventually returned and placed in the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. It becomes one of the most visited exhibits, a powerful symbol of sacrifice and courage, and a reminder that the Battle of Long Tan is not just a military victory, it is a human story. A story of young men who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. The Australians who fought at Long Tan carry the memory with them for the rest of their lives. Many struggle with what they experienced, with the violence, the fear, the loss of friends. Post-traumatic stress disorder is common among veterans, but so is pride. Pride in what they achieved. Pride in their mates. Pride in the fact that they stood their ground and won. The bond between the survivors of Long Tan is unbreakable. They meet every year on the 18th of August. They remember the fallen. They share stories. They support each other, and they ensure that the story of Long Tan is not forgotten, that the sacrifice of their comrades is honored, that future generations understand what happened in that rubber plantation. The Battle of Long Tan is more than a military engagement. It is a defining moment in Australian military history. It ranks alongside Gallipoli, Tobruk, Kokoda, the great battles where Australians proved their courage and skill. But Long Tan is different. Gallipoli was a defeat, a heroic defeat, but a defeat nonetheless. Long Tan was a victory, a decisive, undeniable victory against overwhelming odds. It is proof that the ANZAC spirit, the tradition of courage and mateship, is not just a romantic myth. It is real, it is tested in the crucible of combat, and it endures. The 108 Australians who fought at Long Tan faced over 2,000 enemy soldiers. They were outnumbered, surrounded, running out of ammunition. But they did not break. They held the line. They fought with courage and discipline, and they won. That is the story of Long Tan. That is the legacy of D Company, 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. The monsoon rain washes the blood from the battlefield. The rubber trees stand silent. The jungle reclaims the ground, but the memory remains. 18 names on a cross, 245 enemy dead, and 108 Australians who faced the impossible and survived, the Battle of Long Tan is a testament to the power of training, of discipline, of leadership, of mateship. It is a reminder that in war, numbers do not always decide the outcome, that courage and skill can overcome overwhelming odds, that a small group of determined men can change the course of history. The Australians at Long Tan did not seek glory. They did not seek fame. They were ordinary soldiers doing their duty. But in doing their duty, they achieved something extraordinary. They stopped an enemy offensive. They saved their base. They earned the respect of their allies and the fear of their enemies. And they proved that the Australian soldier, when properly trained and properly led, is among the finest in the world. The story of Long Tan is the story of the Australian Army in Vietnam. It is the story of how a small force, operating far from home, adapted to a brutal and unforgiving environment. It is the story of how they learned the lessons of Malaya and applied them to Vietnam. It is the story of how they fought with skill and courage against an enemy that was determined, experienced, and ruthless. And it is the story of how they won, not through overwhelming firepower, not through superior numbers, but through discipline, training, and the Australians in Vietnam were not perfect. They made mistakes. They suffered losses, they endured hardships, but they also achieved remarkable successes. And the Battle of Long Tan stands as the greatest of those successes, a moment when everything came together, when training met courage, when leadership met determination, when 108 men stood against 2,001. If this story moved you, if you want to honor the memory of those who fought at Long Tan, then share this video. Tell others about what happened on the 18th of August, 1966. Make sure that the sacrifice of those 18 Australians is not forgotten. And subscribe to Vietnam War Records for more untold stories from the Vietnam War. Stories of courage, sacrifice, and the human cost of conflict. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think. And remember the 108 Australians who walked into the Long Tan rubber plantation and faced the impossible. They held the line. They fought with honor. And they won. That is the legacy of Long Tan. That is the story we must never forget.